Hello my friends and fellow VEDSies. So Caleb posted a video recently about his experience with the movie American Graffiti. And in that video he talked about how he had watched the film at a young age and had enjoyed it, but hadn't thought that deeply about it, and then revisiting it realized that it had made a major impression on him and had had a huge impact on his work as an artist. And so he asked us if we had similar experiences with any works of art. And I'm not gonna lie, my gut reaction was, no, I have not. I hyperfixate on shit too much to just one and done anything that really meaningfully changed me. If it did anything meaningful for me, I hyperfixated on it, or I joined the fandom, or I re-experienced it over and over and over again for comfort. There's nothing that's just like a one and done, made a big impact on me type of thing. That's not how I typically operate. But I wanted to prove it to myself, and so I started going down the list of things that I knew had made a big impact on me and checking things off the list. No, that doesn't work, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. No, I was in the fandom. No, I wrote a fanfic. No, I hyperfixated on that for a couple months, and I was just like, shit, I really have nothing. But as I was going down the list, I started focusing on books, because I have a lot of books and I am a writer, and so maybe there was some book that I read at some point that had a bigger impact on me than I realized. And then I realized, oh, I do actually have an answer. I found The Particular Sadness of Lemon Cake by Amy Bender at a library sale. And I picked it up because lemon cake. I love lemon. And the premise of a 9-year-old girl named Rose developing the ability to taste people's emotions in the food that they cook was intriguing, to say the least. I was around 11 when I found the book, and I read it, and I liked it, and I really liked the writing style, but I didn't think about it very often. I know at one point in high school I used a specific scene from it as a reference in a creative writing class because I really liked the way one particular scene was described, but other than that, I didn't revisit this book. But back in February, when I made the slightly tardy New Year's resolution to read more books this year and started a bookstagram about it, I thought that this was one of the books I really wanted to reread because I remember enjoying it as a kid and I was curious to see how much it held up. What I found was that things that hadn't happened to me when I had first read the book resonated deeply the second time around, and it sort of became this chicken and the egg question of, did the book inspire me subconsciously into making some of these choices or feeling some of these feelings, or did I just happen to find myself on a very similar path? Because elements like Rose's brother Joseph having gifted kid burnout issues, and Rose's crush on her brother's best friend as this kind, nerdy, older brother type figure, the way the relationships between the parents and the children play out. Hell, even the relationship with food, which for Rose is due to her ability and for me is due to the arthritis in my jaw, ended up being almost prophetic. And a lot of these elements also creep into my own storytelling and my own writing and aesthetic sensibilities. Young girls who realize that their idyllic lives are actually based on a facade. The dynamics between parents and children when the parents keep secrets. Themes of coming of age and loss of innocence. And that idea of you don't describe war, you describe the burnt sock, being used to bring out all of these complicated emotions through the imagery of these simple family dynamics and aesthetics, and especially in terms of food. The idea of using fantastical elements to symbolize more nebulous concepts and having characters in the narrative, particularly adult characters who are supposed to be role models and figureheads and have the answers, just completely not understanding. Like, Bender does it better, but those are all things that I do too. Like, here's a passage. When I crossed the street, according to my mother, I still had to hold someone's hand. At 10, I would be able to cross streets unhanded. I'd held onto Joseph's many times before, for many years, but holding his was like holding a plant, and the disappointment of fingers that didn't grasp back was so acute that at some point I'd opted to take his forearm instead. For the first few street crossings, that's what I did, but on the corner of Oakwood, on an impulse, I grabbed George's hand. Right away, fingers holding back. The sun. More clustery vines of bougainvillea draping over windows and bulges of dark pink. His warm palm. An orange tabby cat lounging on the sidewalk. People in torn black t-shirts sitting and smoking on steps. The city opening up. We hit the sidewalk and dropped hands. How I wished right then that the whole world was a street. And another one, because now I'm just being self-indulgent. Truth was, it was hard to see George eat those cookie halves without hesitation, without tasting even a speck of the hurry in Janet's oatmeal, which was so rushed it was like eating the calendar of an executive, or without catching a glimpse of the punching bag tucked beside every chocolate chip. I was so jealous already of everyone else's mouth. But I loved George, in part because he believed me. Because if I stood in a cold, plain white room and yelled, "Fire!" he would walk over and ask me why. It was the same thing that would make him into a very good scientist. No, I said, maybe not. Wait, hang on. The guy ducked into the back and came out with a sandwich in his hand, wrapped tightly in plastic. Does this work with sandwiches? He asked. I didn't move. He handed it over. George was watching with a kind of neutral curiosity, and I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do, so I just unwrapped it and took a bite. It was a homemade ham and cheese and mustard sandwich on white bread with a thin piece of lettuce in the middle. Not bad in the food part. Good ham, flat mustard from a functional factory, ordinary bread, tired lettuce pickers. But in the sandwich as a whole, I tasted a kind of yelling almost. Like the sandwich itself was yelling at me, yelling, love me, really loud. The guy at the counter watched me closely. Oh, I said. My girlfriend made it, he said. Your girlfriend makes your sandwiches? Asked George. She likes doing it, said the guy. I didn't know what to say. I put the sandwich down. What? Said the guy. The sandwich wants you to love it, I said. The guy started laughing. My voice, though, was dull. George reached over and took a bite. Is that ham? He said. The sandwich? Asked the guy. It was yelling at me, I said, closing my eyes. It was yelling at me to love it. George took another bite and then rewound the plastic tightly around the bread. Does that sound like her? Nah, said the guy, laughing a little still. I mean, do you love her? George asked. The guy shrugged. Depends on what you mean by love, he said. I laid my head on the table. The yelling was loud, and it was too much information to sort through, and it was way too much for 9 years old. George handed the rest of the sandwich back over the counter. That's it, he said. No more tests for Rose. He reached over and took my hand and squeezed it. We weren't even in traffic. It's a weird book. I'm not going to pretend it's not. It is intensely strange. But at the same time, looking back on it, I can very clearly see so much of my sensibilities, we'll call it, in the pages of this book. And so I guess, Caleb, this is my American Graffiti. I don't really have a good conclusion for this one. I would be curious to hear if anybody else has a piece of media like this. I would also be curious to hear if anybody else has read this book, because only me and my mom seem to have read this one, and it was so instrumental on so many levels for me, and so I would be curious to talk to someone else who's read it. All right, my friends and fellow VEDSies, I'll see you tomorrow.